Question, member from Chatham-Kennedy.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is for the Premier. Today in Ontario, we see a situation where more money is being spent on advertising during election periods by third-party organizations than the major political parties. Premier, this isn't fair, nor is this democracy. Elected officials should be accountable to the people who elect them, not the special interest groups and powerful unions. Tomorrow, I will be introducing the Special Interest Groups Election Advertising Transparency Act. If passed, this bill will put a cap on third-party spending during election periods. Premier, this is about allowing all political parties to have an open, honest debate during elections without the unacceptable propaganda we see from these third-party groups. Premier, will you work with us and pass this bill?
Thank you. Be seated, please. Thank you. Premier.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Well, I think I've answered this question a couple of times, but I'm happy to do it again because we did bring in 2007, we brought in rules into an area where there were no rules, Mr. Speaker. So the member opposite talks about accountability to the people who elect us. I agree with that, Mr. Speaker, and having more transparency and more accountability in place is exactly why we brought in the rules that we did in 2007 when we introduced third-party advertising rules in Ontario for the very first time. There were no rules. There had been no rules put in place at all previous to that, Mr. Speaker. So now third parties that spend $500 or more on election advertising.
That's not going to work. And I will tell you my patience is a little thin on this one because it's simply shouting people down.
$500 or more, they're required to register with the Chief Electoral Officer. They have to report to the Chief Electoral Officer on advertising expenses if that is more than $5,000. If it's more than $5,000, those have to be audited.
Northumberland come to order.
So that kind of transparency, I think, is exactly what's needed.
Thank you. Supplementary.
Premier, you said that you want to be open and transparent.
That's right. Absolutely.
And that you want a government that is accountable. Accountable to who, Premier?
Exactly.
The people of Ontario or the unions that do your bidding? How do you justify not supporting this bill or not allowing your members to vote their conscience? As each election passes, the amount of money spent by the U.S.-style super PACs in Ontario grows. And so does the influence held by special interest groups.
Absolutely.
Premier, this is not the Ontario that I grew up in. Premier, will you do the right thing? And will you support my private member's bill and put an end to the unelected and unaccountable influence currently held by special interest groups?
Be seated, please. Thank you. Premier.
Let me say again, Mr. Speaker, that I agree that there needs to be transparency on who's advertising in these situations. There needs to be an accountability for the money that's being spent. That's why we put in place rules, Mr. Speaker, where there had been no rules, and I've gone over those a couple of times, so that if election advertising expenses are $5,000 or more, then those reports have to be audited. So it's very clear what is being spent, Mr. Speaker. But I will just go back to something that I said earlier to the Leader of the Opposition. I believe that this gambit actually underestimates the people of Ontario and their capacity, voters' capacity, to make decisions. I think that elections, and quite frankly, between elections, Mr. Speaker, there should be broad debate on issues. There should be many, many voices talking about issues to elected officials and to each other within communities. That's the way good decisions get made. That's the way good policy gets made, Mr. Speaker. Stifling that is not our objective.
Final supplementary.
Premier, this isn't about underestimating, the people's ability of Ontario to make informed decisions. This bill is in the best interest of all political parties to put a cap on the enormous amount of money being spent by third parties. If you truly believe that your party is right and that your ideas will be accepted by the people of Ontario in the next election, then allow an honest and open debate by putting a cap on third-party advertising. Absolutely. What kind of a province do we live in where third-party groups are allowed to spend more than political parties? They don't have spending limits, they don't have to report all of their donations, and they don't have to report all of their spendings. So,
Question?
my final question is simple. How can you stand there and say that this isn't completely outrageous? Will you support my bill tomorrow?
You stand, please. You stand, please. Thank you. Premier.
Mr. Speaker, that we did when we came into office was we changed the rules around the way government advertising could work, because one of the things that was happening under the previous regime, Mr. Speaker, under the PCs, was that tax dollars were being spent on very partisan advertising with the picture of the leader and all sorts of attribution to a particular individual on issues that really were to do with government decisions, Mr. Speaker. We changed the rules so that government advertising has to go through the Auditor General, Mr. Speaker. I think that's the kind of transparency that people in the province want to see. I believe, Mr. Speaker, that the party opposite underestimates the voters of this province. We put rules in place to make sure that there was transparency on the expenditure of dollars by third parties. I think that is what is necessary, Mr. Speaker, and I hope that the third party understands that when private members' bills are brought forward, people on this side of the House make their own decisions, Mr. Speaker.